Amelia Hart had never imagined her life would turn this way. Once upon a time, she had been the woman the world envied, the girlfriend of Damian Cross, the billionaire CEO whose face graced the covers of Forbes, Fortune, and every magazine that glorified power. He was brilliant, magnetic, larger than life, and for a while, she thought she had found her forever in him. But forever cracked the night she told him she was pregnant. Damian had been in his office, typing on his laptop, when she showed him the sonogram. His jaw had tightened, his voice sharp, almost cruel. "Amelia, you can't drop this on me now. I can't be a father. Not with everything I've built, everything I'm still building. This will ruin everything." Those words echoed in her mind even now. He hadn't even looked at the image, hadn't reached for her trembling hand. He had only thought of his empire. So she left. She packed her things while he worked late, carrying her unborn child and the scraps of her pride. She moved into a modest apartment in a forgotten corner of the city. It was not glamorous. She worked shifts at a bookstore, sometimes barely making rent, but her life was full of something far more valuable than gold, her daughter. Hope. Hope was a year old now, a curious bundle of laughter with hazel eyes that mirrored her mother's and a defiant little pout that sometimes reminded Amelia of the man she'd once loved. Every giggle, every wobbly first step, every sleepy sigh in her arms was worth the sacrifice. Amelia had chosen love over luxury, and though her nights were often lonely and her body weary, she never regretted it. And yet, sometimes, late at night, when the apartment was quiet and Hope was sleeping, she would remember Damian. She would remember the warmth in his smile before ambition hardened him, the way his hand had once fit around hers, the promises he had made when love was new. And she would wonder, just for a heartbeat, if he ever thought of them. What she didn't know was that he thought of them every day. For 12 months, Damian had been haunted by regret. He had buried himself in work, acquiring companies, signing billion-dollar deals, but the emptiness gnawed at him. His penthouse was silent, his success hollow. He had hired investigators to track Amelia down, but she had vanished as if the earth itself had swallowed her. He remembered the last look in her eyes before she left, heartbreak and finality, and he feared he would never see her again. And then came the call. It was a Tuesday evening when his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but instinct made him answer. "Mr. Cross," a woman's voice asked. "This is St. Mary's Hospital. You've been listed as an emergency contact for Amelia Hart." The pen in his hand dropped to the floor. His pulse thundered in his ears. What happened? She collapsed at work. Exhaustion, dehydration. She's stable, but we thought you should know. For the first time in years, Damian felt something he couldn't control, fear. He drove like a madman through the city, ignoring red lights, horns, and cameras. His world, his empire, meant nothing if Amelia wasn't alive. When he stormed through the hospital doors, his breath caught. There she was. Amelia lay on a bed, pale, her face framed by loose strands of hair, an IV dripping into her arm. She looked fragile in a way he had never seen, her strength drained. But what struck him hardest was not her, but the small child in the chair beside her bed. A little girl with hazel eyes. Damian's knees almost gave out. The nurse noticed his shock. "That's her daughter, Hope. Miss Hart said she didn't have anyone else to call, but your name was in her file. You must be." But Damian didn't hear the rest. The little girl had looked at him, directly, curiously, and then reached out a chubby hand, as if she somehow knew him. Amelia stirred, her lashes fluttering open. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "Damian." Her voice was hoarse. He moved closer, his heart breaking at the sight of her tears. "Amelia, God, what happened to you?" She turned her face away. "You shouldn't be here. I should have always been here," he whispered. His gaze shifted to the baby, who was now clumsily clutching his finger. His throat tightened. "Is she?" "Yes." Amelia's voice cracked. "She's yours." The truth hung heavy between them. Damian sat down heavily in the chair, unable to look away from his daughter. His daughter. The word shattered everything he thought he was. All the money, the power, the years of ambition, suddenly, they meant nothing compared to this tiny girl who had his stubborn stare. "I didn't know," he said, his voice rough. "Yes, you did," Amelia whispered bitterly. "You knew, and you said you didn't want us." Her words sliced through him. Shame washed over him. He remembered every careless syllable he had spoken, every selfish thought that had made him push her away. "I was a fool," he admitted. "I thought I was protecting my world, but all I did was destroy the only thing that mattered. I can't take back the past, Amelia. But let me try now. Please, let me be here for you. For her. Tears filled her eyes. She shook her head weakly. Hope doesn't know you. She doesn't need your money or your empire. She just needs love, and I couldn't risk her growing up with a father who didn't want her. Damian leaned forward, desperation in his voice. Then let me show her. Let me show you. I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I want nothing more than this, than you, than her. Amelia closed her eyes, her heart warring with her mind. She had built walls for so long, walls made of hurt and fear. But when she opened them again, she saw Damian holding their daughter, his hands trembling as if he were holding the most precious jewel in the world. And maybe, just maybe, he finally understood. The days that followed blurred into a strange rhythm. Damian visited every day, bringing fresh flowers for Amelia and gentle toys for Hope. At first, he held the baby awkwardly, terrified of hurting her. But soon, he was reading her bedtime stories, learning how to cradle her bottle, laughing in awe when she babbled nonsense at him. Amelia watched quietly, her heart softening despite herself. She saw the way Damian's gaze never left Hope, how his once cold eyes now glowed with wonder. This was not the man who had pushed her away a year ago. This was a man reborn. When she was finally discharged, Amelia stood hesitantly at the hospital doors. Damian stood beside her, Hope cradled in his arms like she belonged there. Amelia, he said gently, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'm not letting you go again. I'll fight for you, for her, for us. Her eyes filled with tears. A year ago, she had left because he refused to choose them. Now, looking at him, at the way he held their daughter as though she was the very center of his universe, she realized he already had. For the first time in a long while, Amelia allowed herself to hope. Amelia's heart pressed her hand against the cool glass of the penthouse window, the city lights twinkling below like fallen stars. Behind her, the vast living room was silent, sterile, as if it belonged in a magazine. But in her chest, her heart thundered, aching with the memory of words she wished she could forget. You're ruining everything. I can't be a father. Not now, not ever. Damian Cross had said it so easily, his voice clipped, as though her pregnancy were just another inconvenience in his meticulously scheduled life. She had thought she knew him, the man behind the billionaire title, the one who made her laugh when no one was looking, the one who held her like she was the only thing real in his world. But the moment she placed the sonogram on his desk, everything changed. His gaze had gone cold, his hands stayed fixed on his laptop keyboard, and his words carved into her like knives. That night, she packed. She didn't take much, just one suitcase, a handful of keepsakes, and the quiet strength she didn't know she had. At dawn, she slipped out of the penthouse, cradling her unborn child, her heart breaking with every step. She told herself she wasn't running away. She was saving herself, and her baby, from a life of being unwanted. 1 year later, Amelia lived in a modest apartment above a bakery on the edge of the city. The place was small, with creaky wooden floors and paint peeling from the corners, but it was home. Her daughter, Hope, was her world. Hazel eyes, soft tufts of brown hair, and the sweetest laugh that could melt even the coldest day. Amelia worked at a little bookstore, stacking shelves and recommending novels to strangers, her paychecks just enough to cover rent and diapers. Life wasn't easy, but it was full of love. Every milestone, Hope's first smile, her first word, her wobbly steps, was Amelia's treasure. Each sleepless night was softened by the warmth of Hope's tiny arms wrapped around her neck. Amelia told herself she had chosen right. She had chosen love over wealth, peace over pain. And yet, sometimes, late at night when Hope was asleep, Amelia would let herself remember him. Damian, the man who had once kissed her as if she were the only thing that mattered. The man who had thrown it all away in a heartbeat. She wondered if he thought of her, if he thought of their daughter. But she knew men like him didn't look back. What she didn't know was that Damian Cross hadn't stopped looking back since the night she left. The world saw a billionaire genius, a man at the top of his empire. But behind closed doors, Damian was haunted. He remembered her tears, the quiver in her voice when she said, I just wanted you to want us. And then she was gone. He had buried himself in work, trying to convince himself it was for the best. But at night, the penthouse was too quiet. His empire grew, but his heart remained empty. He hired investigators to find her, but every lead ended in nothing. And then, One ordinary Tuesday evening, his phone rang. Mr. Cross, a nurse's voice crackled through the line. This is St. Mary's Hospital. You've been listed as an emergency contact for Amelia Hart. The pen slipped from his fingers. His chest tightened. For the first time in years, Damian Cross felt fear. Part 2, the emergency. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Damian barely remembered the traffic lights he ignored, the horns that followed him. His entire being focused on one thing, Amelia. When he finally stormed into the his world stopped. There she was, Amelia, lying pale and fragile on a hospital bed, an IV in her arm. Her skin looked too pale, her lips too dry, but she was breathing. Relief swept through him, only to be replaced by something that nearly brought him to his knees. Beside her bed sat a little girl, hugging a worn stuffed rabbit. She couldn't have been more than a year old. Her hazel eyes blinked up at him with innocent curiosity, and Damian's heart stuttered. Mr. Cross, a nurse stepped forward. Miss Hart collapsed at work from exhaustion and dehydration. She'll recover with rest, but she's been under enormous stress, especially raising her daughter alone. Her daughter. His daughter. Damian felt the air leave his lungs. He moved closer, unable to tear his eyes from the child. She had his eyes, his expression, his blood. The girl, Hope, Amelia had once whispered that name, reached out a tiny hand and wrapped her fingers around his. In that instant, Damian Cross, the untouchable billionaire, broke. Amelia, his voice was raw as he looked at her. Why didn't you tell me? Her lashes fluttered open. For a moment, shock flickered in her gaze, then pain. Because you told me you didn't want us. The words struck harder than any boardroom defeat. He lowered his head, guilt tearing through him. I was wrong. God, Amelia, I was so wrong. I thought I was protecting my world, but all I did was destroy it. Her eyes filled with tears. Hope doesn't need your empire. She just needs love, and I couldn't let her grow up with a father who saw her as a mistake. Damian sank into the chair, his hand trembling as Hope still clung to him. For the first time in his life, the man who had everything looked utterly powerless. Then let me try, he whispered. Let me prove to her, to you, that she's the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Amelia studied him, torn between disbelief and the aching hope she tried so hard to bury. She had survived this long without him. She didn't need him, but when she saw the way he held Hope, when she saw the awe in his eyes, she wondered if he had finally changed. The days that followed blurred into a strange rhythm. Damian came every day. He brought flowers for Amelia, soft toys for Hope. He held the baby clumsily at first, then with growing ease, marveling at her every giggle, every babble. He sat by Amelia's bed, reading stories aloud just to see Hope's face light up. And Amelia, though guarded, couldn't ignore the truth. This was not the Damian who had once turned them away. This was a man who had finally realized what mattered. When Amelia was discharged, she hesitated at the hospital doors. Damian stood beside her, Hope in his arms, holding her as though she was the most precious treasure in the world. Amelia, he said softly, I can't erase the past. But I'll spend the rest of my life fighting for you. For her. For us. Tears welled in her eyes. A year ago, she had left because he wouldn't choose them. Now, standing before her, she realized he already had. And for the first time since the night she walked away, Amelia allowed herself to hope again.